first heard Anubis Gate in 2011, and just the minute I heard Hold Back Tomorrow, like that song connected with me so much. And then the song Golden Days was another one that just completely, I don't know, it spoke to me in a certain way. And that song actually became an anchor for me over the years. So I just wanted to tell you thank you for such an incredibly song that connected with me on a lot of levels.
You're welcome. Of course. It was actually Jakob Hansen who did the song. I did the lyrics, but he did all the rest of it. So I can only take half of the honor. Yeah.
Well, it was the lyrics for me, to be honest. That was
all right.
What was, yeah. I'm a writer myself, so I'm very drawn to lyrics. And one of the things I loved was that in the lyrics, it kind of speaks to like a dreamer of any age, which I loved that you touched on in that song. That in so many words, you're never too old to dream, and the older you get, you should keep going, because the older we get, we lose touch of those dreams. And I just turned 51, and so that song was something that I went back to, and I really connected with that and felt inspired. Was that kind of where you were coming from lyrically with that song?
I'll start by saying that I'm quite positive that I couldn't have written those words when I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you talk about it now, I think it takes some kind of maturity to get those words down. Yeah, so I was probably in my late 30s or early 40s when I did it. So that makes sense. I think the original inspiration for it was exactly the thing that you kind of have this invincible force, or at least thought of yourself when you're young, and as you grow older, you get more and more immortal. Mortal, of course. You thought you were immortal, and now you are actually finding yourself mortal. So that's a whole lifetime of experiences going through that song. Maybe you could say that it starts off with the immortality, and then you end with almost dying. Or perhaps, or at least the awareness of death, I would say. Yeah. So it's not very interesting what I had in mind when I wrote it. It's more interesting what you get from it, I think, and what everybody who hears a certain lyric get. I know you do. You know the song, the singer Seal? He did "Kiss from a Rose" and stuff. He didn't print any lyrics on any albums because the idea was, if you get something else from hearing these words that I didn't intend, I'm not going to be the one to tell you otherwise. The listener get from the lyrics just hearing it, and maybe it's wrong, but if they get a certain thing out of it, then it doesn't matter what was originally written or why it was written. But of course, I love to talk about lyrics and stuff. Don't get me wrong. But I think your version of it is as doable as mine, or just as correct.
One of the things I appreciate the most is when you can create something, create a story or create a narrative, but then somebody might hear it and interpret it in a way that it's not a full color narrative. It's almost like you're giving someone, a coloring sheet and saying, okay, here's the lines. Now you fill it in with the color of what you see it to be. And I love that, because I don't always want to know what a certain song is about. I like to hear where people were coming from when they wrote a song or what they had in mind. But I love the concept of not knowing.
Somebody else once said, and that was wise words that I've tried to follow ever since, actually, and maybe I did before unconsciously, but the more concrete a lyric is, the less interesting it will be to everybody else.
I love a lot of 80s metal bands and even, you know, folk singers or whatever. And you take a band like Saxon, who was always very literal in all of their songs. It left very little room for interpretation or to even create something for yourself. Whereas you took a band like Iron Maiden, where they would have these stories that you could almost put yourself into and create your own visuals in your mind and whatnot. And I used to love that. And so that's what I got out of your lyric writing, in the sense is that it also seems to be pretty abstract at times.
Yeah, that's the idea, that you put in your own story or your own exactly how you interpret it is just as good as my interpretation. And if I go too concrete, too precise, the less interesting it will be for you, because it will be my story and my story only, really. So it will be hard to put yourself into it if it's very precisely me. So that's what I've been trying to pursue forever, I think. So I hope I'm doing all right. It seems like I am.
The self-titled album, and then also with Horizons, really had a good presence here in the States with metal fans. Did you notice a influx of fans from North America more so than you did before, after the release of those two particular albums?
I can't say that I do, and that's maybe because also we don't get to tour much, so we weren't out and about meeting any fans on on the back of those albums. We did the only interesting job at that time was in the Netherlands, the Prog Power Festival down there in 2012, and we didn't meet a lot of Americans there, but when we played live the last time, and it was in 2018, 6 people from USA came over and to see it in Denmark. So that was quite something. So that might indicate a sort of interest from the US, and it would make perfect sense because we changed the label to Nightmare Records for those albums, and he was located in Minnesota, I think. So if he couldn't explore his own market, his own US market, then we would be kind of surprised. So perhaps that's what happened, really, that Lance King got hold of us.
I actually remember you guys were booked to play the Prog Power Festival in Atlanta. I was still living in Atlanta at the time. My wife and I were, and I was so excited. And then I heard that you guys had canceled due to some somebody had some mental health things going on. And like, you know what, though, as someone who deals with that myself, I thought it was actually very admirable that you guys were transparent enough to talk about that. And with that being said, do you find it a little easier sometimes to maybe even incorporate the concept of mental health into your writing ever? Or do you kind of use the writing to kind of deter away from that for yourself?
Yeah, that's interesting. And in my daytime work, I play with people who has this kind of problems with the psyche. So perhaps I could be inspired by them, actually, and also inspired by what was going on inside the group. So I think it cuts both ways, but mostly on a what do you call that, imaginary level, I think, actually, because I personally, I don't suffer from that kind of illness, so I'll have to adopt from someone who does. And since I work with these guys every day, it's easy for me to put myself in their place, so to speak.
I always worry about people who don't write, like, in my mind, because in my mind, I'm like, what do you do with all of that information? Like, what do you do with all, like, my wife, she tells me all the time, she says, I don't know how you write songs. I'm like, I don't know how you don't. I was like, what do you do with this? But that's kind of a beautiful way to use your tool as a way to also understand that level of connection with that for yourself.
Exactly. And some of these lyrics, for instance, the song Black is directly inspired by a story that I was told by one of my students. So it's really her story put to words by me. So she was kind of very honored to be able to see herself so clearly in one of my lyrics. So, but it was great inspiration for me to have all this. She wrote a long essay almost of what her life had been, and we just cherry picked from those words and made my own version of it. So definitely, it has roots. They have roots in the real life. Some of these lyrics, yes, and other things are totally made up, but on the back of what I've heard and what could have been.
But it also goes with not being literal, like you were able to take this aspect of something that moved you, and instead of writing this completely literal story about somebody, you found a way to incorporate it into, say, your own story, your own character. And that's kind of cool, because in some ways when you're writing like that, do you find that you can kind of create like this character of sorts or this narrative, but that you still find a little bit of yourself in it without knowing that you were?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes not at all. I think I have the ability to put myself on hold completely sometimes, and just kind of like if I was making a script for a film, I don't think that the guys, James Cameron and stuff, who did Terminator, they could see themselves in the Terminator figure. I hope not, for instance. And in that same way, I think I can put myself aside and really just explore my imagination or something. And at other times, I feel like now it's time for something a little more deep felt, a little more personal, and especially in my solo works, I would incorporate myself a little bit more, I think. So usually it's about somebody else, because I have such a boring life.
I have to second that with you, because I
have a boring life.
It's probably a good bit more exciting than mine, but I always think to myself that if I did write strictly about myself, I mean, aside from the typical, mental health issues, anxiety, whatever, like I've got a great marriage, I've got a great home, I've got my own little studio. I'm like, my life is good, but that doesn't make for good music, man. It's like people don't want to hear that you're doing good.
It's actually very difficult to write about something just plain good.
Why do you think that is?
There's not enough meat on it, in some way, or it gets too superficial. I think, and I have done the song called "Living It Up" is pretty much it's very, very blue-eyed, nothing going on really. So that was the intent of that song, but I won't be doing another one like it, I think. And I also Leonardo DiCaprio, when he was gonna do the Titanic film, I remember him saying it was actually really hard to do, because this guy that I'm portraying, he's just a normal bloke, and he doesn't have a worry in his life. He's just out of the box. hey, here I am, let's go. It was hard to do. And you would think that it was kind of easy to do, but it isn't. So maybe that's the same thing about lyrics. I don't know, but I'm not doing very any more of those. I think it has to mean something more. There has to be some snakes in the paradise.
Oh, I like that. I might use that as a song title. I'll give you a writing credit.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Or maybe I should give you one. Who's writing it first?
Well, it would probably do better if you did. So let's let you do the work and just put my name on it.
Yeah, all right.
But see, and that's one of the things we're talking about with the songwriting is that when things are good, like you listen to those songs and it's just kind of like you said, like it's a weird kind of flex. I've got it good and I've got this and this, that, and the other. It's like, how are you doing? And you're like, I feel like shit right now. You know? But it's more comforting to find out that there's someone else that also feels like shit. And then you can listen to it. You're like, oh man, you get me.
Exactly. It doesn't have that many layers, I think. There's not many layers to really go into in a happy-go-lucky lyric. It's very one-sided. Or you should start off with doing something like that, and then in verse 2 it gets too minor and things start changing. I don't know, something like that. That's very simple, really. But
when I'm listening to someone else's lyrics, one of the things that I do like to focus on is not trying to translate it, but trying to see where this person is coming. I feel like Bob Dylan was the best at that. Was that a lot of times his lyrics did not make sense. It was just almost like beat poetry put to folk music. But then if you listen to it, every time you listen to it, you might have a different interpretation of it. So when you are settling in to write lyrics, what is generally your process if it doesn't shift around?
The process is, in most cases, I would say, the song has already been made, and there's a demo of it with me singing some crappy English words that don't make sense at all, right? I don't know, some words that don't make sense, and I probably couldn't do it in Danish because that would be too weird. But in English, it's more like it's not my native language, so I can just fuck around with it like I want to, right? So at the end of the day, there's this demo that we all in Anubis Gate, for instance, listen to for months, perhaps, where I've sung this crap. And one day we need the real lyrics to come forward, and I need to sit down and write something that we actually can use. And some of these words, for some reason, I get lucky sometimes, and I find some words or vowels that fit the song perfectly. So I'll start off with saying, all right, this chorus says something like, I don't know, I can't come up with anything right now, but if I can keep some of the words from that chorus, for instance, that sound good, I'll do that. And sometimes it actually inspires me. When I sit when I have a title like Golden Days or something, I'll say, okay, Golden Days, what could that be about? Oh, so I kind of fiddle around to find a story that matches the words that I already recorded. Yeah.
You guys released a cover of Pink Floyd's Sheep years ago. And I was just recently on a Pink Floyd Reddit group. Yeah, do you know what Reddit is? Yeah. I was on a Pink Floyd Reddit group, and somebody had made a post saying like their favorite Pink Floyd covers. And someone posted Anubis Gate's cover of Sheep. And people loved it. And I had to ask you, so it was an incredible cover. Is Animals actually your favorite Pink Floyd album?
I didn't choose this song.
You did not.
I had nothing to do with it. I think perhaps that Jesper Møller Jensen, one of the founders who sadly died in 2020, you know?
Yes, I remember. Yes.
He and Kim Olesen, they had always talked about that they wanted to, that you could make a great metal track out of that song. And we finally did. But Jesper was not in the group when we did. So, yeah. But that's the story. I think it's Kim's work, Kim's doing. But I would say that Animals is my favorite album when you ask. I think, but it's not that song. I actually find, what's it called, For Dogs. I think that's one of the greatest Pink Floyd songs of all time. I wish we had done that one instead, because I wasn't very keen on Sheep actually.
I thought
it turned out right. Yeah,
I was about to say, I thought it turned out so well that I was convinced that you chose it because you sang it so well.
I was actually against it. I tried to stop it, but that's the story of it. But I could totally hear it working when we started recording it, of course. So I'm not displeased with it in any way now. I think actually we gave it some energy that I thought was lacking in the original one. I wasn't that keen on the vocal melodies. I don't think I changed any of them, but I think I did something to make it more me in some way that I could more easily adapt to it or see myself in it, I think. Yeah.
And that is a sign of a great band when you can take a song and cover it and make it your own, as opposed to just saying like, we're going to play this note for note and nail it and whatever. And but you did the same thing with Broken Wings, which is incredible. What I also love it when metal bands do these kinds of covers of songs that aren't metal. It kind of points or makes a very loud statement that some of these songs are so well written that they can be interpreted in various styles of playing. But it also reminds us in general that metal musicians and metal music in general is a lot more diverse and has a lot more depth and feel to it than most people give it credit for.
I think you're right. When these pop songs, I don't know if we can call Pink Floyd pop, but it's more pop than metal, at least, maybe, or prog rock. When these songs don't fall apart when they are being transferred into metal, you could say, then it also points back at the metal in some way, that actually good metal songs are basically just good songs that could also be interpreted the other way around. Not done very much. I think it's not that often that you hear some Iron Maiden song played on the dance floor with the four to the floor and stuff. Why not? Why don't you settle down? Sit down with your favorite metal songs and then do a pop version of some of them? That could be interesting. Maybe I'm the guy to do that. Actually, I have toyed with the idea of actually picking out like 10 Anubis Gate songs and make them pop. It could be interesting.
I would love that. And that's a nice little segue into Electricity. When I got a hold of Electricity, I was like, how have I not known about this? This is such an incredible, it was so much fun. But I could also hear that you were pulling from so many different influences. Is it a little more freeing, I guess, or liberating to be able to do that on your own, away from the loud metal thing?
I definitely, at least I don't have the interest in going metal with any of my solo things, because I get a lot of of that out with Anubis Gate. So it definitely has to be something else. So I would never do something like that. But yes, of course, when you are doing something solo, and it is pretty much solo, because I do most of the stuff. I have very few guest appearances on this. It gives you a lot of freedom, of course, to do exactly what you want to do. But at the same time, it's lonely. You don't get any input from anybody else. So there's no one to fuck it up, and there's no one to help giving birth to this. So you're on your own, for good and for bad, I would say.
I've been working on an album now for over 3 years, and it's a solo album. It's just me. And I have to say that sentiment is exactly how I feel, is that there's this incredible plus side to not having to deal with people. But at the same time, I do miss the kind of camaraderie.
You can't have everything. You want to be sovereign in all that you do, but at the same time, you don't get any input, or you have to look for input somewhere else. So actually, I know people who makes records, and they don't listen to any other music while they're doing it, because they don't want to get it mixed up with others' ideas. And I feel the opposite. I need to hear a lot of music at the same time. And all of a sudden I hear somebody say, yes, a guitar could also sound like that. And it could be like, yeah, I'll try that in that song because I need something there. So I think I get the inspiration from other albums instead of other people in that situation. But I need the camaraderie as well. And it's a great pleasure to, Anubis Gate is a Dropbox band, as we usually call us. And that means I find usually somebody else makes some riffs and they send them to me, and I send something back in response to what they have written. And it's always a pleasure to send something off. What do you think of this? What is this? And get the feedback. Oh, we're on the same page still. Oh, right. Okay, I'll go in that direction. So you get this kind of response all the time from people that you work with, and it gives a lot of energy that I kind of miss when I do it myself, obviously. But yeah, so that's how it is, and I couldn't do without one or the other.
I never really understood the whole idea of people saying like, "Oh, I can't listen to other music when I'm writing an album." I mean,
you heard that as well?
Oh, I've heard that a lot. I know people personally who actually say that also. But to me, it kind of is, it's exactly what you said, is that if I find myself closing myself off to everything, then I almost feel like in some ways I'm limiting myself, because then I'm only using what I have in my mind and what I have at that moment. So in some ways I find myself being inspired and influenced in a way because I don't have the people around me to do that.
Right. So yeah. So that's us, our savior in that situation, really, or our inspiration when it can't come from somebody else. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I'm happy to hear that other people feel like that, because when I sit at home and I do this kind of this music, I don't play against somebody. So I don't know. I haven't talked about this with anyone before, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Going right off of what you were just talking about listening to other music and whatnot when you're working on an album with Electricity, which again is such a fantastic album, and it's such a nice break from what I would normally be listening to. But I listened to such a broad scope of music that it had no problem finding a home, but it was different from everything I'm listening to right now. I heard things like, I heard elements of Enigma, I heard a little bit of Sting, and even the song Striptease I thought sounded like Sade a little bit. We talked about that before. Is it safe to say that that's kind of a good example of how music that you might listen to can incorporate itself into what you're writing at the time?
Yeah, at least the last one you mentioned. I've listened to a lot of Police, especially when I was a kid. And I'm not that fond of Sting solo things, and I don't know why. Because if I were to make a list of elements that would have to be present in my music or in the music that I listen to, let's say that, I think that I could tick a lot of boxes with Sting, but maybe he's too obviously good. Or I don't know, maybe he's doing all the right things, so I find it boring because that's what I would have done. I don't know. I thought a great deal about this, but at least the song Striptease and Sade, I can honestly say that the outro of that song, I eagerly try to make Love is Stronger Than Pride. The whole beach summer mood. That's the mood I was interested in. I'm not interested in doing something that sounded like that in that way, but I wanted to evoke the same emotions from people listening to it, and it sounds like I've reached that goal with you, at least.
And maybe even so with other metal fans, because one of the things as being a longtime metal fan since the early 80s, I learned growing up that metal fans tend to be some of the most bold listening audiences. Like, they will listen to things a way that a fan of top 40 music probably wouldn't be open to listening to, or that, fan of jazz music might not be opening, but yet I know metal fans who love jazz and who love, 70s power pop. And so to me, like, when I hear this, my first thought was, I could totally see the majority of a metal audience, or maybe even the Anubis Gate fans, really loving this album because it was you, but it was something completely different.
It's funny that you say that, because I've actually thought that perhaps this wasn't the case. I thought, this is too pop, this is too mainstream for any Anubis Gate metal fans. I'm probably not even gonna, tell about it, because what's the point? Yeah. No, people would think that I'm off, that I'm doing all the wrong things here. I should be doing metal with Anubis Gate, not that pop shit. I don't know. That was my initial thought of it. And still, I talked to a drummer that I'm working with here, and he said, put it out anywhere that you can. Why not on the Anubis Gate Facebook? Maybe there's an audience there. You don't know that. Try all the channels that you have available. And I thought, yeah, well, of course. And I did, and that's why I sit here with you now.
Music is only good if it's out in the world. It does us no good to keep it to ourselves. I love that idea that you did challenge yourself enough to just put that out there instead of just keeping it to yourself.
Right. And I'm not apologizing for anything, really. I just thought that it was maybe not the right the right people to go to. That was it. I thought that there were other channels that were more obvious for me to go with this kind of music, and time has proven that I was actually wrong, because there are people who listen to metal today aren't that narrow-sighted as I was when I was 13. I wouldn't listen to anything else. If there was no distorted guitars on there, I wouldn't have been interested at all.
When did that change for you?
It changed only a couple of years later, I think. And I actually turned my back on metal totally. I didn't listen to it for like 20 years or something. And I think I kind of found out that that other music was more interesting, more layered. It had more, I don't know if substance were the right thing, but it had so many also dynamics to it that metal didn't. And still there is something wrong with metal, with that being it's very in your face the whole time. You know what I mean? It's very compressed, like a crazy massive wall that is going at you all the time. And I get very tired in my head of listening to too much metal. I'm sorry to say that. I would like it to be more generally more melodic and more jazzy, or more dynamic, in more changes from this form distorted guitars and double bass drum, and to something quieter.
I think around 1995, 94 for me, I was playing in a heavy metal band, and I was so tired of it. It was changing a lot. It was going towards a whole new sound. I didn't love it. And then a friend of mine turned me on to the Grateful Dead. And I started listening to the Grateful Dead, and exactly what you said. I'm hearing these things and I'm going, this is like a hippie version of Iron Maiden. But instead of like one big wall of just distortion or consistent volume, there were these peaks and valleys and swells, and you could hear the guitar note for note for note what was being played. And then I found myself exploring a lot of those things, a lot more jazz music, a lot more fusion music. Matter of fact, I was going to tell you, as your album, which was quite unusually quiet, that to me is like a Robert Fripp soundscape album, which I love. So when words just don't seem to be there, like, is this how was this like planned to be instrumental and planned to kind of have those elements more so than just the typical, like, okay, now I'm going to put lyrics to that? Because I'm curious how the music changes for you when you're not going to have lyrics to it.
The idea was for that album to be an ambient album from the get-go. I never intended on putting any lyrics on that, and it all comes from my desire to probably to do something else, but also a desire to make an ambient album. And I've been working on this for 20 years, I think. Because I don't have a lot of that stuff in me, apparently. Not something that I would thought was good enough for releasing. So it started really in during COVID-19 days, when I thought, all right, maybe this is the time to dig in and find out what is laying around in the vaults. Do I actually have something that could turn into a full album at some point? So that's when I started doing it, and more stuff came along, and so it just came out of my love for the ambient music. Brian Eno, Dave Sylvians, people like that who done ambient stuff that I thought was great, and it doesn't take that much attention to listen to. It can easily play in the back while you're at a dinner party. You can sleep to it, you can fall asleep to it, and you can just rest and have some music in your ears. That was the initial idea of doing this. And at the moment when you have lyrics and you have singing on top, it demands some kind of attention that this music doesn't. So that was what I was after. It's not so much about melody. There's no choruses in ambient music. There's no sing-along things that you should participate in. You can just relax and you just go with the flow. But I think also the the dangerous thing about doing this is that it is somewhat easy to do. If you have a synthesizer with a lot of different sounds, you can press just one key and it says, and you already started some journey. But the interesting thing for me was to make this as interesting as if it had the lyrics and had that element to it as well. And that's what I mean by that. It took a very long time to do it, because I could easily do that thing with just put some whale song on and then press a key or two on different sounds on a keyboard. And some people would think, yeah, that's ambient, that's good listening music, I can fall asleep to this. Yes, but it's not enough for me. I wanted more substance to it. So what I did mostly on that record was to put on some piano to make some kind of melody, but not there's no repetitions really. It's all one long go, and it actually, I don't know if you noticed, but it actually ended out as a requiem of sorts, because it is actually a kind of a death travel, that whole piece.
I did not know that. Where did that come from?
I think it came from my father, who is rather ill with Parkinson's disease at the moment. So, and I always wanted to do a classical requiem, and I started one some 20 years ago, and it never came to fruition. So it was just one more kind of element to it that could kind of raise it a bit from not having the lyrics and the vocals on it, that there was at least a story. And it's only in the it's of course it's also in the music of some sorts, but you can only see what's going on if you read the titles of the songs. And so yeah.
Well, Henrik, thank you so much, man. You're such a great guy, and I appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you, Don. Likewise.
Broad daylight, too bright for sore eyes. You've been hiding so long. Human being in disguise. Emotion, I know you've been dreaming. While looking back in time, you've come back to life streaming. Colors are beckoning, offers are checking, and someone is back from the dead. There to open the door, breathe the air, and turn your life.